This stat never fails me when it comes to real estate. 46% of all real estate agents currently this past year did not even do one transaction.
Mm.
That is just crazy on so many levels in terms of, how is someone sustaining themselves? How can they possibly be very proficient at their craft? How are they possibly giving the very best service to their customers who were served? And yeah, now I see why they may have, the public may have some reservations about their loyalty to real estate agents. But I definitely want to dive in on that as we talk later about how Florida's market is being, affected by the incoming administration, and if it will get better or worse. But first, I want to talk about something that, is obviously very top of mind, man. The California wildfires and their impact on just real estate in general. And where my mind went, because I know we were kind of kicking around some ideas for today's pod is, what does this do for, this just is another huge blow to the insurance industry. That's where my mind went right away. Obviously, the devastation, the sadness around people losing their homes and the displacement that happens there, and just, where are people being moved around to? But what were your initial thoughts about that in terms of, in a real estate context?
Yeah, in a real estate context, mine went to the insurance as well, man. It went to, the stories around people paying insurance for 20 something years, some of them 30 plus years. And then sadly being dropped, 6 months before the fires. And, so not only their homes, their personal belongings, but then all of their, family heirlooms and that kind of stuff. So that's a whole big part of it. But yeah, the insurance, man, that's, it's like, I don't know. I keep rummaging around in my head of like, there has to be something that's going to happen with insurance. And I don't know. I don't know how far out we want to go with this, but my thoughts go to that some kind of AI figuring out how to pool risk, how to pool money. It's just such a quagmire of a problem, man.
I equate this to the COVID moment where we all went remote and we were forced to go remote and work remote, and all of a sudden it ended up working out and it becoming a thing that I think moves forward. Although I know this current administration, I believe, just signed into law that everybody has to go back to work, at least government employees, I believe it was, federal employees. But, that's kind of a movement going back to the office. But I still don't think it'll ever be the way it was before. And obviously commercial real estate is kind of showing those effects in terms of, how much is available and empty. That's kind of where my brain went on that.
Mm. It's like, where are these, I don't know if it's going to be are these people going to rebuild, or is there going to be, kind of to your point, some kind of exodus where they consolidate the resources that are left and go, I'm out. I'm going to go, live in Arizona or Florida or Texas, or, they get fed up with the, as a side, but a big point, like the taxes in California, the cost of living in California. I don't know, pal. I think it's got to flush out, like to your point about, COVID. It's funny because there's actually a migration kind of moving back to the cities, to like New York especially. People are moving back. People are moving back to New Jersey in these areas. So I don't know, man. There's so much of like, we could pontificate, which you and I are really good at, and that's part of what we like to do. Also, it's like, you got to kind of like see how things will shake out. So
yeah, and my point in making that example of COVID is that we never went back, and so does this mean that to your point, this is kind of where I was alluding to, is as we incorporate AI, this is all kind of coming up at a similar time, does it, intersect with a better way to offer an insurance solution? Or the word
Mm,
insurance goes away into some other kind of word, right? Into another industry, another business, because it's able to be calculated, by a different system, algorithm, et cetera, that no longer needs the traditional insurance setup. Sometimes these forced scenarios, these accidents, whether man-made or natural, just upend everything. That something brand new comes up that nobody expected would come up. And I'm an
yeah.
optimist. I know you are too. So I almost kind of look forward to that, because we certainly see so many cracks in the way insurance operates not right now. Even here in our home state here of Florida, similar thing, people getting dropped. We're having issues with condo buildings that are of a certain age, that are near the water, they're experiencing erosion and damage, and all of a sudden, someone's been living there for 20, 30 years, retiring potentially, thinking that they're comfortable and they have a nest egg, and all of a sudden their monthly HOA dues to cover the building's insurance goes from $400 to $500 to $1,500, which for many could be completely insurmountable. And so all of these things are chipping away at, in my opinion, chipping away at the foundation of how insurance works. Uh, and if it's not working for the masses, there has to be some kind of change.
Mm. Along the lines of change, so this is one of the things I've been thinking about. This. I don't know if you knew this, but in college, I went for 3 years of forestry, so have a little bit of an understanding around, um, how nature works. And one of the problems out there, which I hope that in the terrible destruction and loss of lives, property, all that happened. I hope that something comes out of this as far as policy is concerned. And just to kind of double click into that forestry thing, now so the problem is when you have leaf litter that drops to the ground, right? Nature's been working for a really long time. you know, that's to sound trite about it, but nature's been working for a really long time and has done a good job of managing itself. And when you come in and kind of go against nature, so one of the things that nature needs is to burn off the leaf litter, whether that's needles or leaves out there. Mostly these is pine. It every few years it burns off, and in fact, it actually regenerates the soil. So it burns that off. There's nutrients that go back into the soil. It's all been working this way to, the forest has been growing and growing and growing, and fire is part of it. And one of the things that didn't happen out there was controlled burns, either or allowing or cleaning up the leaf litter. It's better to burn it. And I guess it's a really tough thing. I'm not saying that I'm coming in going, oh, they should have done controlled burns, because, you got people's homes that are tightly packed into these areas. So I hope that there's some kind of policy that comes from either the Forest Service and or California that says, hey, we're not going to let this happen again. B, back to, mitigating the homes or the type of home that's built in this area. You obviously shouldn't be building with wood, right? You should be building with concrete block, and the roofs should be some kind of either stone or composite or something like that. This one's just thinking, I hope that it just doesn't God, I hope it doesn't happen again. So I hope that they integrate some either controlled burns or more distance between the lots. But, back to these people still own these lots, some of them. And I heard that actually they had did you see that on the All In podcast, that they did a 3-month moratorium on unsolicited bids on these lots?
No, I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. It makes sense.
Yeah. I kind of thought about it from, you remember back in the foreclosure days where they were kind of trying not to have the investors come in. They were giving the opportunity for first-time home buyers and stuff to buy these so that BlackRock wouldn't buy up all of these homes. So I don't know, man. It's such a mess, but I hope that there's some lessons that are learned due to the deep devastation that's happened. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you bring up another interesting point. Obviously, it's another. If we're not careful, it could be another potential money grab for those that have, right? Those that have and have the ability to write a $1 billion check to purchase all these assets. It just continues to divide, the haves and have-nots, and that's a consistent talking point right now in terms of how what our economy looks like and who are the ones in control and have the power. Not to get you know weird about it or overly emphatic about it or
yeah,
conspiracy theory direction, but certainly there is that divide, right? And I think with AI and technology, that divide is going to continue. But you know, preventing, I think, the larger entities from amassing, what really, in my opinion, is, and bringing it back to real estate because it ties back in, is everyone should have a little piece of the pie. And I think it starts with owning your own home or owning some property, something that you can tangibly call your own. I think that's so fundamental. And so preventing, the big guys, so to speak, to come through and just grab it because it's a money opportunity is just, it's distasteful, in my opinion, first. And I think it's just wrong for the health and well-being of us as a society.
yeah. I think one of the big lessons I've been thinking about, we've talked, and I still do think that owning real estate is a good thing. I think it's a good place to, if it's your home. When it comes into rental properties and that, I think you got to be really careful about where you put your money. I think there's other places that you can put your money. I don't know if you realize this. I mean, I've been thinking about this as far as inflation's concerned. 20 years ago, a median single family home was 3 times earnings, right? So if you made, $30,000 a year, you'd be buying a $100,000 home. Now, the median income home in the United States is like 10 times earnings at a minimum. And you get out into California and that, I mean, it can be 20 times earnings. So that home ownership thing, back to your point here, and it's not a conspiracy thing. I think it's just an inflation thing, which is a expansion of the money supply, and we've talked about this before. I think that I think what it comes down to is living within inside your means. So not kind of trying to keep up with the Joneses. I see people, really maxing out what they can afford. And I think that, I think people I don't want to should on people, but really think about kind of maybe buying a home or a condo, because there's opportunities now in the condo market. I don't know if we're going to have time to kind of get into some of these numbers and talk about that. But I do think, the condo market has, to your point, especially here in Florida, has escalated in inventory. Prices have been dropping, which is a scary thing to buy into, and that's the whole, Warren Buffett, you buy fear and sell greed type thing. I think there's a really good opportunity for people to maybe get into a condo, but just not to max it out. I'm going a little bit sideways there with it, and I kind of went.
No, I mean, let's take advantage of that pivot because we're kind of tapping into the other thing that I think we both wanted to talk about was the Florida real estate market and the incoming administration and what the market may look like moving forward here. Will that have a lot of impact for buyers and for sellers and for homeowners in terms of their equity and values in their homes right now? If I may for a second take a stab at it, I think it's just going to be, there's going to be a pause currently right now, but I think the overall health of the Florida real estate market is very good, especially since the administration, has a strong presence in South Florida, and South Florida seems to continue to grow in many aspects. But what's your take on it?
I think that the debt ceiling is going to be reached here in 2 months, 3 months, something like that. So we're going to have another one of those moments where we've had over the last, it seems like maybe 10 years or so, where it's like the government's going to shut down. We've got to raise the debt ceiling. Um, I think, they're trying to do things of, the DOG, the Department of Government Efficiency. I also I mean, it's hard to tell what's real out there, but they're also considering putting a lot of federal buildings if they're not going back to work. There's a lot of vacant properties from people not going to work. They're going to put those on the market. But aside from that, I think that I believe they'll raise the debt ceiling. And I believe also they're going to put pressure. I think that the Trump administration is going to put pressure on the Fed. And the Fed is meant to be its own autonomous entity, that they make decisions based on monetary policy, for inflation. Yet there can be pressure that's put on. So I believe that they're going to put pressure on Powell to lower interest rates. And so as a byproduct of that, I think we both know if interest rates go down, more people can buy. There's more inventory now. Properties have been, I could show some stats up here if we want to, of almost double the days on the market. So there's people looking to sell and are really wanting to sell, and the sellers are now realizing they're not in control. We sold 160 units last year, and we're seeing now that the buyers are I don't know if they know they're in control, or they just feel it, or they're just a little tentative, but they are not quick to make a move. We are still selling units. So I think they think there's going to be pressure. I think they're going to lower interest rates, and I think as a byproduct of that, we're going to see, I think at least a stabilization. That's my thinking.
Yeah, and a couple of things that you kind of mentioned there that made me think is there's always people that need to sell, regardless of what the market is doing. There's always a portion of homeowners that need to sell for whatever reason. They're moving to a different location, family obligations, job changes. Unfortunately, the passing of homeowners and how it changes within the family. There's always going to be a need to sell. It's not like everyone's looking for the perfect time to buy or sell. Sometimes there's a need to do that. And so I think what we're seeing, and to your point, is kind of that starting to accumulate, right? More people that have to sell are not having an easy time selling. And so those are starting to kind of back up. And I think we're certainly approaching, if we're not quite yet at a more balanced market here, specifically in South Florida. So the tide will turn, and then obviously if it becomes inexpensive or less expensive, more affordable is probably a better term to buy because interest rates come down. Then we'll see what that kind of dynamic does to our market. But the second point I wanted to make is it's South Florida. It's still a very desirable, again, outside of the market, outside of who's buying, who's selling, and who has the upper hand. It's still South Florida, and it still remains a very desirable place to live, and certainly remains a capital for retirement.
You said one thing there. There definitely are going to be people that need to sell, job transfer, death, divorce, destitution type thing, like a real need to sell. But what I'm seeing now is kind of what I mentioned earlier. I think you're seeing some strong want to sell. From the standpoint of, for instance, I have a listing right now, just as an example, and he's not in a need, but he moved here, they moved here, husband and wife, and just not their jam. They moved during the big C and thought that, they wanted to get away and be in a quieter area. But what they realized after living here, they're moving back down to the West Palm area, right? And it's not a need. Retired, pretty flush with cash, and already went out and bought another home down in West Palm. And so that's not a need. It's just a strong want after realizing after the move from COVID, from the disruption, that they wanted to move. And so now they're in a place of, hey, inventory's up. And they really need to, we've been on the market for 2.5 weeks or so, and 2 showings. Now it's a higher price point. But I guess my point in there is I think you're going to start to see people kind of back to what they really, some of these people selling because they really, really want to. They've realized that they maybe moved to an area. I mentioned it earlier, people moving back to New York, moving back to the areas that they thought, I'm out. I don't want to be in a city anymore. And then like, wait a second, I really love the city. I really want to be back in the city. So I think you're seeing some, you always have the needs to your point, but I think you're starting to see, after a couple of years, people, they just go, man, I want to be back where I was originally. So that's kind of what I'm seeing too.
Let's double click into the data. I mean, that's kind of our analysis, but if you don't mind, why don't you kind of go through some of the things you were looking at? And I know these are obviously data points that you share with the team as well.
Yeah. And I do this stuff on my YouTube channel as well. So this is an aggregate, just to give you an idea of how many units this is putting together. This is 42,000 units, and this is something called Stellar MLS, which integrates a bunch of different MLSs. And this is just single-family homes, no price point, just all of those homes, right? So you got 42,000. You can see these are the properties coming on the market. So
And sorry, Alex. Geographically, what area is this?
it covers a large degree of South and Central and some areas in Northern Florida. So I don't have so it's a good degree of South Florida. It's probably I think 5 or 6 MLSs put together, Eddie.
Okay.
So this is just single family homes. So you can see obviously this is for sale, sold, pended. So if you went back 1224, 1223, 32.8, you got 10,000 more units on the market in that 1 year, just as an example, right? 1224, you had 10,682 units. You had 9,400. So, almost 1,000 units less sold, or less units sold than this time last year. So
10%-ish, yeah.
Yep. So then you can see kind of the average price point hasn't moved much, Eddie, right? $248 a square foot. If we go back, $249. It's really just gone kind of level, right? Bounced up a little bit, but came back, right? We got this one, which I think is always an interesting one to look at, days on the market. So when when people are, I hope that maybe there's some people out there or real estate agents looking out there of this is the kind of data that we find very powerful to understand where the macro market is at. This is not a CMA. This is a macro picture of what's going on. This is the days on the market, 71 days on the market, 1224. We go back a year, 55. So this is kind of a cool thing. It's called a market highlight. So it's up 4.4, but it's from last month, but it's up almost 30% more days on the market since this time last year. Is there anything that you want to double click into here and we keep going?
Well, no, I mean, you certainly keep going. I think what I eventually want to get to is kind of your analysis as to, what either within your team or for those real estate agents that are, watching our channel and trying to learn as to how to also present some of this data or, kind of what are the main talking points that should be having conversation. And from my perspective, I always think, okay, how am I going to translate this into really good video content for lead generation and for my database to keep them, abreast of what's going on and what might impact them. So what are those kind of talking points you may be counseling your team to share?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it's really, we call it, so let's boil this down for a real estate agent. Yes, a comparative market analysis is a really important thing to understand how to do, right? Your neighborhood, type of home, age, how it relates to, that little geo area. You want to think of it how an appraiser would look at it. You don't want to be in kind of a 10-mile radius. You want to be within a 6-month period, right? For that, we call it the micro analysis, so the comparative market analysis. This is very powerful stuff. We bring this over to listing appointments. Very few agents do that. This system is called Trend Graphics. You can get this anywhere in the country. This aggregates MLS data, right? So that you can talk to the customer and say, okay, this 4 months of inventory. Now, this is the macro picture. When I can go over here, bud, and I can do all the different MLSs that we're in. So I can do, this is Southeast Florida. We do Indian River County. This is Martin County. So we integrate all of these, right? So if we're going up in Indian River County, we can say this is what's going on in Indian River County from an inventory standpoint. This is very powerful from a standpoint of you could say to somebody, okay, look, yeah, you bought it last year, right? And we can go back. There's all kinds of, I don't want to get into it, but you could do the period. I can go back 10 years. I can go back 5 years. I can go back 3 years. So this has been helpful with people that bought 3 years ago, right? And they're like, well, it has to have gone up by then. And it's like, actually, you're pretty much where you were 3 years ago. And I know that might be a tough thing to hear. You see what I'm saying? So these are the conversations that are very, very helpful. And you can clue into these market highlights, which, say, look, we're actually down average price per square foot from the macro picture. We're down. You're down 0.4% since a year ago. So your home has not appreciated in the macro picture. Now, you have to compare the micro picture, the comparative market analysis for that particular community and property type, and then kind of compare those two. And this is really just good data for you to understand, but also your customers like, wow, the last agent that came over, just came with this market analysis. Maybe it was a good one, maybe it was mediocre, but even if it was a good one, are they coming over with this kind of data? Does that make sense?
No, I love this. I mean, to me, this to me is just, I salivate over this stuff because it's such a great way to preemptively strike when you are prospecting and lead generating and going into an appointment. If I've got an appointment next week, I'm shooting a video for Mary and Dave and say, Mary and Dave, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday at 5. But before I get there, I wanted to share some of this information. I mean, immediately you're separating yourself. You're on camera, you're speaking to them. And again, this is the video guy in me, right? But it's what's worked for me so well, right, is be able to be the purveyor and the interpreter of data for them. Be like, man, this guy knows it. So I walk in the door and I'm shaking hands. Now I'm just, cementing by physically being there, looking them in the eye, all those important things too, right? Dressing well, shaking their hand, looking them in the eye and saying, did you get my information? And undoubtedly they'd be like, yeah, that was fantastic. Great, because now I want to drill down as to what's specifically happening in your neighborhood. So really aligning with what your point was, right? Giving them a macro of understanding that you are a student. As a real estate agent, you are a student of the market. You understand what's going on, what are the dynamics at play that might be affecting them. And then you sit down at the kitchen table, so to speak, and you say, well, in this market, a home like yours sold for X, Y, and Z.
100%, man.
That's
and I do said this
level approach.
100%. Yeah, so we call it the macro picture, and we usually do the macro picture first. Here's what's going on in the overall market, right? Now let's dive into your community and say, okay, yeah, we want to price you here, but be cognizant that, there's 4 months of inventory. So a seller's market, just for understanding purposes here, of more language to understand. A seller's market is under 3 months of inventory. A neutral market is between 3 and 6 months of inventory, and a buyer's market is over 6 months of inventory. Even just knowing that, right, is valuable, right? Like it just separates you. Now you've seen also, Eddie, me putting out, then you can cut this, put this into reels, put it into shorts, and it's a little bit of a branding piece of just like, I put these out, you see me, man, like, 2 or 3 of them a week. People they think like, God, okay, this guy's, so this is a branding piece too. So I did want to show you here another piece that I think is important. I kind of skipped ahead a little bit here, but this is the condo market, right? And so this is an aggregate of the condo and townhomes. You can see over here, like I got condos, townhomes before I had single family homes, right? So what do we see here, buddy? Right? So we got 1224, average 283 a square foot, 1223, it was 314. It's dropped. That's what's going on with this condo market. So it's down. So that person, as a as a macro. So I don't always say to people, that means you're down 10%. No, we need to look at the micro market, the comparative market analysis, because you may not be. You may be up a little bit, but we need to understand how you stand in the grand scheme of things, right? Here's another thing. So you can say, hey, on average, it's taking 82 days for a property to sell as of 12/24. We went back to 12/23. It's 55. It's taking, well, let's look at the market highlight, right? I don't have to do the math. It's up almost 50% days on market. Pretty powerful, right? So you get to give the customer an understanding of expectation. Hey, it's taking almost double, well, 50% more time to sell, right? Lastly, here we look at the month supply of inventory. You can say, look, that condo market was actually in a buyer's market for 3 months. Now we did just drop, so we're just at neutral buyer market. So I think this stuff is valuable. I like that you brought it up, Eddie, that it's more we're talking to the agents out there for these kind of things to show that how can you elevate your game? How can you elevate your presentations? Not only to get more listings, but to sell, even from a buyer side, buddy, right? Like you could show this to a buyer and say, look, there's great opportunity out there. There's 6 months of inventory. Properties are on the market 50% longer. We can make offers. So.
Yeah, I love how you finished that. That's where my head was at too. It's like, hey, listen, we can make an offer. Before you had to be careful because you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot and completely be dismissed. But now you can get into a conversation. That was tough. That was tough not too long ago to even get in the conversation. Right. Remember the days? I mean, you had to go on top of plus. And I'll throw in my kid. He'll mow your lawn for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So information's powerful. And as an agent out there, I think this has been one of the big differentiators for me. And then this is what I teach to the team every Monday morning. We do, market update, and we go over the numbers. And sometimes in there, somebody will say, hey, I have a CMA I'm doing. I'll do a CMA, not for them. They do it. I say, make sure that you do it. I don't want to just do it for you, but bring it in before you show me yours. Let me do it. And the team gets to see how I work through. And then we all say, hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? So we get to collectively learn together. So that's another way we use it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you said differentiator. That really keyed in with me. It's like that is, and you have to find those differentiators in your business as to who you are, how you operate. And a lot of it is also what you personally like to analyze, just because I know you enjoy going through the data. Mm-hmm. And, it's valuable, but it also speaks to a certain client. So you're going to make the match. And I know in our last, if you haven't watched it, you got to watch our last episode where we talked about how you garnered that YouTube client after 128 videos, I think we talked about. And that should be up by the time you're watching this one, but definitely click on that one because that tells the story of, you actually connected with him. Because he liked watching your data. He liked that you were a data guy and you were sharing those points. And that keyed in with him. And eventually he just called you and there was no selling on your behalf to have to do. He was already your client. He was already your customer. He was going to do business with you. So that's if you haven't seen that one, definitely check that one out. But listen, I thought this was really helpful. I think a couple of points here that we hit are very timely, and hopefully this adds value to how you pursue your clients in 2025. But thanks, man. Is there anything else you wanted to share on that?
No, I know we had a little bit of a truncated thing here today, but I think we hit some great points. And, if anybody out there is curious about this kind of stuff, Eddie and I are happy to talk to you more about how to run your business, how to help you grow your business. We're always here. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Absolutely. Leave a comment, let us know, send us a message. We're pretty easy to get a hold of and we're happy to help. And we've got quite a bit of experience that I think you'll find helpful. But until next time, thanks for watching The Relative End Agent. If you haven't subscribed and you like this content, make sure to subscribe. And as always, buddy, love talking to you. Have a great week.
Likewise, bud. Take care.